Podcasting since 2005. This is the King of Podcasts Radio Network. KingofPodcasts.com.
'Tis the season of giving, thus I give you another bonus broadcast of the Broadcasters Podcast.
The King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast. Here is the King of Podcasts.
Guess count, this is episode 418 of the Broadcasters Podcast. King of Podcasts here with you. Bonus episode. Look, I'm here because, as always, there's going to be some things that will come up for the year that I have a little extra time right now. And with my schedule the way it's kind of working out, I had time this week to go ahead and add another episode because my plan, as I said last week, was to bring you an interview, which I'm still going to bring you. Rafi Gomez, he hosts the Twitch stream called Danceteria Rewind. He's also done shows like The Groove Boutique on syndicated radio, among other things. So fascinating radio career for him. And I have Rafi Gomez as a guest here on the program. And that interview you will hear this coming Thursday in its normal time slot here on the Broadcasters Podcast. But the news that's coming out this week, I couldn't help but put another show in to the can because there are going to be some things that I do not want to go and wait until next week that came up. So let's get into a few of those things. It won't be a very long program. We'll probably go about half an hour, but I want to go through a few things, a little bit of end of year stuff that I thought would also go into things as well. But let's go into this right now. Just for fun. I want to go into the movies that I enjoyed this year. Now, everybody's putting out their top 10 songs, top 10 music, all this stuff. And, I can tell you exactly what's on my Spotify when it comes to the top 10 songs that I enjoyed the most this year, according to my Spotify. And if I haven't told you already yet, the top 10 songs on my list here are Swedish Mafia and Wait So Long, Why Do I Have To? Dynamite by Tyla and Wizkid is my number 9. A Dembo song called Trollo by Rochi Aride and Donati at number 8. Also a big EDM fan, by the way. Move a Little Closer by Dubs and Abby Flynn. Tate McCurry Sports Car comes in at number 6. Jump by Blackpink is number 5. No Broke Boys by Disco Lines and Tinashe at 4. Here in Your Arms, Nathan Dawe and Abby Flynn at 3. Number 2 and number 1, I said earlier, Gabriella and Gnarly with Cat's Eye. By Cat's Eye. So Gabrielle 2, Gnarly was number 1. In my movie list, I want to get into that real quick. Based on the movies that are out in 2025, I don't want to give an exact, say, top 10 list, but I'll get into where I have, just looking at the top 25 top grossing movies, and I'll give you what 10 movies that I would absolutely say were my favorites this year. Rental Family would go right into that list. I would go ahead and put, after that, Nuremberg. I'd put on that list. I would put Caught Stealing, the movie with Austin Butler. Nuremberg, that was Rami Malek and John Slattery, among other people. Begonia, Emma Stone, Jesse Plemons, I would put at that list as well. Baby Girl with Nicole Kidman, I would also put on that list. I will say I enjoyed The Housemaid this week, and I would almost put that in the list, but I think maybe not yet. Black Bag, one of my favorites of the year. Nobody 2, I really enjoyed this year. And I have to go a little bit higher up. I would say The Amateur would also be on that list. I would put Chainsaw the Man, the movie, in that list. I know it's a very weird list that I have. I would put The Accountant 2 up there. I would put One Battle After Another up there. These are all movies that I saw this year. Then I would include F1 and Sinners. Now, I don't know if that makes 10, but that's the top movies that I saw this year that I really enjoyed and went on my way to go and watch. I would also put Relay on that list as well, which was not a movie that a lot of people talked about, but I really did enjoy this year. It's just kind of out there for people. This wasn't that big of a movie that everybody talked about, but that's okay. Honorable mention I would give to Alto Nights. I enjoyed that as well. It's Joe Pesci and Robert De Niro. Obviously, not a lot of people talk about this movie, but I really did enjoy it. If I had to pick movies on the bottom part of the list, I could give you a couple. I would put Honey Don't in that mix because it just didn't get right. It didn't go right for me. Hurry Up Tomorrow is absolutely on that. It's on the worst of the list. Oh my goodness, The Weeknd. Hey, he made money though. I'll give him that. And I will put Tron Ares in that list as well. Deserved. It's just true. So let's move along into the feature story. FCC ownership caps and the National Association of Broadcasters are putting their pressure campaign up against Congress right now, and FCC necessarily, to eliminate or relax radio ownership limits. So there were comments that were filed to the FCC in the quadrennial media ownership review. We know that we've been worrying about this and hearing about this particular part of the FCC ownership rules that was going to be considered in the quadrennial review. And so the idea is to eliminate or substantially relax further local radio ownership limits because the decades-old restrictions no longer serve the public interest in a media marketplace dominated by unregulated digital competitors. So yes, the internet is hurting us. You need to help us. Wah, wah. We're crying in our pram. So the groups and companies that have gotten into this mix, Beasley Media Group, arguing the FCC should repeal the local radio ownership rule entirely, that the rules remain static for 3 decades, and eliminating the rule would allow broadcasters to develop the economies of scale needed to compete with large, unregulated digital platforms and continue producing local programming and emergency services. Then you have a coalition of broadcasters, Connoisseur Media, Town Square, Bonneville, Midwest, a couple of major companies, also urging elimination of the local ownership rule. So it'll modify it in ways to allow greater in-market consolidation. And they say that current ownership caps prevent stations from achieving the scale necessary to compete for listeners against and advertising against digital audio platforms and big tech companies. Like they haven't had their own competition of their own selves. They're kind of going up against themselves and not helping themselves and leveraging with quality content or with quality talent to help support that content. I mean, if you're diminishing the value of what you're putting out on the air, why should the FCC give you something for that? It doesn't make any sense. But they've been using the same excuse of, well, they're just losing money hand over foot. Well, it doesn't mean that they have to go and lose it altogether. It's because they've allowed themselves to lose consistently to streaming, to digital platforms, to the internet. It's their fault. Their streaming platforms, their streaming services that they have right now to stream their stations. I mean, the radio stations could have taken advantage of the fact that they have now more of a spectrum, more of expansive audience that they can go ahead and reach out to. Every one of these radio stations that, they're hurting because the FM dial, okay, this and that. You have multiple pipelines of revenue that you can make right now. For those of these stations out here, they don't want to go ahead and promote, let's do something here with this station. It's streaming everywhere. Okay. There are apps out there that support what is being done here with radio. Okay. Tune in, Radio Garden. There are plenty of radio apps out there. iHeartRadio, Odyssey, or radio.com or other apps out there that have thousands of radio stations. Why are those people not listening to those radio stations? Because they all have ads within them. And because of the ads they have there to go and support, they're not doing anything to go ahead and limit the amount of inventory of ad space. I mean, you could do what YouTube does more often and say, okay, you want to have some kind of ads up there for people to listen to so that because you'd listen to your content. You don't offer a subscription model so that people can listen to your station commercial free, but then you also add the talent, and then you also, work harder on putting a more favorable playlist out there for those that are streaming. I mean, really, how often do radio stations consider the audience that is streaming for their music to make them stand out among the others? The whole point is that there are people that will still listen to radio. I mean, there's people that watch on TikTok or Twitch, and there are people that are commenting all the time during songs. So there's a space for that. And it doesn't mean that radio doesn't have to go and do that anymore. They can help to identify songs or identify artists that people should listen to more. But they don't want to do that. I mean, the thing is, you could also stream in the way of where they don't utilize Twitch to go ahead and have maybe a webcam out there and have people that are streaming. I mean, some of these DJs are doing that somewhat themselves, but they're really not doing much more. They're not necessarily having the streams up so they can have people listen to their music, because they're not doing that. The whole point is that radio has not successfully learned how to multi-platform. And they don't want to multi-platform. They still want to try to make people go and listen to their AM FM signal and spend on that in particular. But they're not doing anything to make radio, which is still available in every automobile. As far as I know, every automobile still has an infotainment system that has AM and FM. And even if you lose AM, it still has FM out there. There are enough spots on the dial to go ahead and take those stations and do something with. But they don't do that. Plus, if you have the ownership change so that, let's say, newspapers, local magazines, alternative publications, who knows what other media is out there that's going to be involved in this. Tell me something. So if you have these newspapers that are going to be involved with this, and let's just say that these media companies decide to go ahead and bring on different linear platforms. Okay, radio with a newspaper. Will you let the newspaper actually help to operate the radio station? Will you let their people go ahead and work on that radio station? Will that be possible? I mean, if you have people that are on television and you want to put them on the radio, I don't know. There's something where, are you going to let some of that talent that you have on other platforms that you own, will you incorporate it into the radio station? Or are you just going to let the radio station operate like it normally does? Where's the compromise here? In return for getting the right to ask the FCC to repeal and eliminate the local radio ownership rule, where is the compromise for stations to say, okay, if we do this, then we need to show that we're going to invest more on the radio airways, because we need to make sure that people, if they're going to watch the station or listen to the station on a digital stream, they need to be actually investing in the actual content and not just trying to go and prop up their stations with more money coming from somewhere else and allowing radio to be a loss leader. Does that make sense? I don't hear any of these radio companies saying that. More on the coalition, they say that preserving localism and diversity now depends on allowing broadcasters to expand their reach within local markets. Without regulatory relief, they warn radio will continue to lose audience share and advertising revenue, undermining its ability to invest in staffing, programming, and community service. What's holding you back from putting the staffing together or the programming and community service? If you just have people that are just engineers or producers in there, and you bring people from, let's just say, city or county government or advocacy organizations, whatever, there are plenty of people that will go and do public affairs programming for you. Now, it might not generate a whole lot of buzz, but like you have, I'm pretty sure, enough resources in any given local market to bring them to the radio station and utilize them for public affairs, to use them for programming that will be good for the local public. Are they doing that? Not anymore. Not as much. I don't think so. JVC Media, which is an operator of radio stations down here in South Florida, where I'm at, Central and South Florida, they say that they support modernizing and meaningfully relaxing and limits, arguing the current rules are outdated, economically restrictive, and fundamentally misaligned with today's competitive media landscape. And they said ownership flexibility would allow broadcasters to pull resources, strengthen emergency operations, and invest in more local content rather than less. So for the local, smaller stations, yeah, a JVC Media, they want to get something more to pull from other media resources that they would own. That's kind of like what I'm talking about, but I want all these stations to do the same thing in return for the local radio ownership rule to be relaxed or eliminated. Now, the National Association of Broadcasters wants all the rules to be abolished, that they should be abolished, contending the rigid ownership limits should be abandoned in favor of case-by-case transaction review, that the agency has already taken that approach with wireless carriers and other media services. So the docket remains open for reply comments through January 16th of next year. FCC Chair Brendan Carr says he remains very open-minded on how the FCC will move forward. And that's a lot. So a lot of companies coming in and making their point. These companies all here collectively, they're saying that the key to reviving revenue in radio is deregulation. And it would in turn inspire advertiser investment, then give stations the ability to maintain the infrastructure to provide local news and information. And many of the arguments are declining ad dollars and listener numbers. According to a Burrell Associates survey, on average, individual radio stations receive 1%, less than 1% of total local advertising share this year. And they say that fighting to achieve a 1% share is not a means to local radio survival. I'm thinking this from Radio World, by the way. The companies are also arguing that radio groups to own more stations in their markets is essential for competing with big tech. Now, the FCC revisited this quadrennial review of the radio ownership caps in 2018 and kept everything status quo. But then the FCC was still looking and viewing the radio market as a separate marketplace. And the NAB was saying that the internet was relevant competition to radio, but now they're going to go to that at this point. And by insisting the review order, radio remains a unique marketplace, the commission ducked the competition analysis that Section 202 of the Telecommunications Act of 1986 requires. Quote, if radio continues to be defined as a unique market, the commission could leave the ownership restrictions on radio in place forever to make sure that no radio company dominates the radio market, even as radio faded into obscurity. Now, the FCC says they can no longer distinguish, that the FCC cannot distinguish radio broadcasting from other platforms because it is a free service. And Edison Research says that 66% of Americans using streaming audio do on platforms with paid subscriptions. So they're giving all their stats. And the shift from traditional to digital ad spending is on a meteoric rise. Digital media share of all local advertising has gone from 26% in 2015 to 70% in 2024. So one of the things, for instance, as an example, if the FCC cannot get an elimination of local radio ownership, they want to have the current tiers be modified significantly. So in San Francisco, for example, the caps should allow ownership of more than 20 radio stations, rather than being restricted to 8 stations currently permitted. Do you understand what this means? We're talking about that eventually many of these radio stations will be owned by no more than a couple of different operators, and that'll be it. With some local operations still available. But some of these local stations, they'll probably be picked up. And the thing is, I don't understand why they want to go and worry about this, because for some of the radio stations they want to go and buy, okay, there's going to be some merging between some companies for the radio stations. I can see where Infinity, or now Odyssey, they will go ahead and sell their stations to somebody else. I mean, can iHeart get into the mix? Are there other media companies that want to get into the mix and buy up? Will there be more investment dollars from iHeart or Odyssey or one of these other radio companies to buy up and buy more into intellectual properties of these other radio stations? Like, how many more stations do they want that are Class A, Class B, Class C, 10, 50, 100,000 watts? Like, how many more stations are viable for any of these companies to go and own and operate? Which, if they do take those stations over, they will own and operate them at the bare minimum, and they'll just hold on to them basically almost like it's ransom. Because they're not going to do anything to help program and improve these stations. Because remember, at the end of the day, a lot of these radio companies are owned by private equity. So they just want to hold on to it. But they're not going to necessarily do anything to help improve the radio stations. They just want to keep it so it'll be profiting something. But at the same time, then they can also own and operate newspapers and other traditional outlets, and then just buy whatever they want and just consolidate everything. So if a company wants to go ahead and buy 10, 20 radio stations, basically take the entire market of stations and the TV stations and the newspapers and let one company own everything. I mean, will we have stations that will go silent? They'll just be taken off the air because stations will be just consolidated or simulcast or whatever. I don't know. And the ownership rules, will that also count towards the non-commercial stations? Will those dials will that part of the dial above 92 FM, will that be considered commercial? And then those will all be for sale too. We don't know. But if these ownership caps are allowed to happen, I mean, it just breaks open that there will be no local operators. I mean, it's completely against what they're saying, but these companies don't care. I want the FCC not to go and do it, but they're going to do it anyway, probably. I could say no. I could say, please stop. But the National Association of Broadcasters, an extremely powerful lobby, and, deregulation is going to happen anyway. So if they want to continue to have all of these companies just buy everything up on the linear side, then just things go ahead and continue to fall apart. iHeartRadio is obviously seeing that they're not looking into the radio model as a revenue stream. They're just kind of holding on to it while they are monetizing and profiting off of podcasts. Now they have their deal with Netflix. They have some of their podcasting over on Netflix. And what is iHeartRadio doing? They're going to start supporting full-length video podcasts beginning in 2026. So they're going to plan to add full-length video podcast distribution to iHeartRadio. And podcasters will be able to distribute full-length video versions of the shows onto the app and web versions of iHeartRadio, among traditional audio episodes. What Spotify's already been doing. Now, I don't know if iTunes have gotten there, or Apple Podcasts have gotten there. I don't know. But the expansion is being built around three core principles: creative net integrity, monetization, autonomy, and control over hosting. And creators will determine how their content appears on the platform, whether audio only, video, or both, while retaining ownership of their work. Bob Pittman, the iHeart chairman and CEO, says that video podcasting is now emerging as a completely separate and incremental form to audio. In the same way podcasting evolved as a new layer on top of broadcast radio, video is becoming an additional layer for creators. Well, they decided to go this route. I don't know if it's going to make much of a difference. But then again, I'm also not that privy to video podcasts. Look, I know that people want to create some kind of visual to their podcasting. And I could have done that too with all my programming, but for what? I'm doing a monologue on most of my shows. And if I have guests, it's all on a Zoom call or just like a Google Meet or whatever it is. For me, does it really matter to putting it up on video? Like, I'm not going to go through the trouble of adding, lower thirds and a little bit of sweeps, a little bit of video magic on here to make it look nice and clean. No. I mean, it doesn't matter to me because you still know that on YouTube, they talk about the fact that 30% of all podcasts are actually being seen. Most people are still passively watching podcasts, but they're listening to it more. So if every good podcast out there continues to remember that people are going to be listening to you and they don't necessarily have to go ahead and watch the TV to go ahead and listen to you, they're going to listen anyway. Because podcasting is still audio first. Audio is still priority. And if you don't do it that way, you're doing television. Let's just make that clear. But I see so many different podcasts with a video element, a video component. That's fine. But give me some reason why you want to go ahead and have yourself on camera. So you can show the same studio that you have, a nice looking setup, and you do it, and everybody gets to see the same one over and over. Or because if you have a guest on, you want to have that guest be seen, and that might interest people to watch. But you're not showing any extra information. You're not showing any B-roll. You're not doing anything where you're giving us other things to watch on the screen. If it's just back and forth, that's one thing, So it's television. I mean, we have talk shows out there. We have people that are doing those kind of shows. But even if people are doing monologues, which some people don't want to, if they're doing podcasting, they might not even think about doing a monologue. or maybe not have an extra co-host. And they'll still do a show, and I'm like, okay, well, you want to do that, that's fine, but I never thought about it myself. I just considered, you know what, I want to just keep doing this like I do. And some 12 years later, after starting off this podcast project as King of Podcasts, I haven't worried about video. Once in a while, I put something up, but really, not really. I'll support the video component and put out subtitles that I think are important. So if you're listening to the show and you can't necessarily listen to it right then and there, but you want to read the subtitles, I'll give you that. Like, I'll give you something besides what you're normally watching. And I think that's a good thing. That makes it a little more beneficial for people. But I know that, there's a YouTube audience that will catch my content. And they want to get into it because that's where they normally catch all their podcasts. Like, the one thing is, with YouTube, it's a great place to find podcasts and listen to them. And if you want to listen to them as a podcast, or you want to listen to them or watch them, it's good. But because YouTube is such a great platform for distribution, that's why videos become important. Plus the social media component. Like, I understand if you want to go and put out video as clips to draw people to the actual audio, that sounds like a good thing. There's not a lot that I see in a podcast that tells me that it needs to be on television or that it needs to have a video component. But hey, listen, if you have the willingness to go ahead and get a new camera and, you want to put it out there and make it look nice, that means you can't get rid of the stutters and stammers. Your editing is going to be a little bit tougher to go and do. And the amount of time to render is much longer. That's the part I can't stand. And that's why I don't like doing video, because it takes more time to produce. Audio, I can get this done in less than an hour and do everything I need to do when I finish up recording. And so I can record as much as I want. Like, I could do this every day. And it would be easier for me to just like crank out a podcast, crank out one, done. But to do it on video, more time. And trust me, I have a client right now that I do for video. And don't get me wrong, Descript is a great platform out there. But then if you want to do all the other elements you want to put with it, I mean, that's the part where, like, okay, I could do all the video stuff. I'm more than capable of doing that, but it takes too long. Like, if you want it to be high quality, you want it to be 4K or a high HD, a 1080p, whatever, to do all that and make it 30 to 60 minutes, we're talking, up to like an hour sometimes of rendering the video to get it where you want it to be with all those changes to the elements. I don't want to make time for that. And the thing is, how much of a powerful computer do you need with enough RAM or bandwidth out there to be able to go ahead and generate it quickly? It's not that easy. But that's the part I don't worry about. I don't want to keep doing all that work. It's just too much. Now, an interesting story from the area of CBS News. I have not talked about this at all, but I think this week is a pretty good week about it because of what happened. Now, look. The decision to go ahead and let the editor of the Free Press, a popular website, Barry Weiss, she's been on Joe Rogan, she's been on different other shows, and has been out there as a political pundit for a long time. She was picked to go and become editor-in-chief at CBS News. And so there have been changes being made, changes to the evening news, to 60 Minutes, and all together just making changes and putting out programming that's trying to also be for the internet, to put out streaming content that's going to get a lot of buzz, and put some news programming out on the linear to try to do something more with it. Now, to go ahead and take someone that is done a pretty good job on a website that is for the internet, for political content and for news content, that's one thing. But to take on the behemoth of a CBS News with such a long heralded history, and to let someone that is from the internet go into the linear platform to change, that's a real shakeup. But it's also like there's trying to make changes to a traditional platform that doesn't work. So there's an analysis from The Wrap that came up about this, and it's all centering around a 60 Minutes investigation that was supposed to run this past Sunday after football on CBS, but was replaced last minute. For Monday morning's 9 a.m. editorial call, the editor-in-chief of CBS News, Barry Weiss, talked about having trust, both our trust for each other and our trust with the public. And on 60 Minutes, Barry Weiss, as editor-in-chief, abruptly pulled a veteran correspondent's report on the brutal and torturous conditions Venezuelan migrants endured after they were sent and deported to a notorious El Salvador prison, a supermax prison. And Sharon Alfonsi was the reporter on that. And Barry Weiss told her staff that I held the 60-minute story because it was not ready, and that the piece did not advance the ball beyond what other outlets had reported. Quote, we needed to be able to get the principles on the record and on camera, and that our viewers come first, not the listening schedule or anything else. That's my North Star, and I hope it's yours too. No one said anything after that. But then the word was, according to the Wrap, one staffer told them, everyone in the newsroom in New York noticed the silence of the executives after Barry spoke. Weiss turned to Wendy Fisher, Senior Vice President of Editorial for CBS News and Stations, continuing the editorial call, focusing on the news of the day without addressing a decision that's up in the newsroom. So they're saying that there are certain ulterior motives that Barry Weiss had to pull the story, weighing the merits of a 60 Minutes investigative story, and then decided to go ahead and pull it because of who might not like the story. Now, according to the Wrap here, they say even if Barry Weiss had legitimate journalistic concerns, an insider says she articulated behind the scenes, mishandled them by allowing the piece to be widely promoted for days before abruptly pulling it Sunday evening with little explanation, beyond the segment needing additional reporting and vague plans to air it in a future broadcast. Now, Alfonsi, the reporter, suggested Weiss made a political decision to hold their story, and that the segment was screened 5 times and cleared by both CBS attorneys and standards and practices. Now, she's been known along a bunch of circles when it comes to talking for herself before joining CBS News, being on Real Time with Bill Maher, working at the New York Times as an opinion writer and editor. But one of the things that also is making CBS News a little bit apprehensive is the fact of having to go and pull stories out of 60 Minutes because of the suit that President Trump put against 60 Minutes, to which $16 million was awarded to the president by Paramount and Skydance as a result of it. Whatever that reason was and however people want to feel about it, again, I'm not talking politics in this program. I'm just saying what's the actual fact on here. And Barry Weiss has not spoken to the public since this happened. So one of the FCC commissioners, Anna Gomez, a Democrat, made the point that against the backdrop of increased government pressure, reports that CBS News interfere with the editorial judgment of 60 Minutes are deeply alarming and strike at the heart of press freedom, and that the public has the right to question how CBS will ensure the independence and integrity of its journalism going forward, that the network will prove its viewers with a clear accounting of how this decision was made and demonstrate how it will safeguard the independence of its newsroom. Well, the thing is, with Barry Weiss, okay, if you're going to go ahead and, make changes to a story, then where were you being involved with it? I think that's the part I think people didn't understand, is that traditional media moves very slow. If we're talking about a story about deported immigrants being held under bad conditions in a Venezuelan prison, that story's been going on for most of the year. So, of course, investigate a story, they probably could have run this a couple of months ago. So to run it here, it took some time for this to all happen. And Barry Weiss might be under that whole impression of where she was in journalism, where you could pull a story just before, but doesn't understand that CBS News, they have to go through the network to go and promote 60 Minutes because it is heavily promoted throughout the week and especially during football. So if they can't deliver on the story for whatever reason, and for people to go ahead and tune into that, especially with CBS 60 Minutes being such a popular program, still one of the top 5, top 10 shows in network television because of the overrun of the NFL. So a lot of eyeballs on that program. They can't just promise something during football and just not show it. So they're right about that. 60 Minutes being a news magazine doesn't have that problem normally to go and have particular interviews that they can't just run through. So I mean, the one thing is, why pull the story if there's pressure? What I would prefer a Barry Weiss to do in that situation is you run the story anyway. And if there's something that comes back to it that causes a stir from the White House, for example, you retract or you disclaim it or you correct the record on television. What is so hard about that? Why are we pressured for the fact that, okay, you want to put the story out there, you prepared the story, your legal team has gone through it, standards and practices have gone through it, run the story. You take the risk, okay, there might be some reporting that might be a little bit, that might cause some stirring up, but no matter what, this is where you disclaim, okay? When there are stories that go out there and there's a gross, okay, for instance, the BBC and the news magazine they had over there, and on various stories they reported over there, and a whistleblower from the BBC spoke with the Telegraph in the UK and told them, hey, look, there's gross misreporting going on by the BBC, a government-owned entity, which is paid for by taxpayers in Britain. Yeah, they're doing some nefarious things over there with their programming, with their content on news. So, to have to go for so long with what they did, again, it was deceptive editing they did on that, which is the same they said with the Kamala Harris video. There was deceptive editing. That's the part that everybody was complaining about. So, there's that. And that happens a lot in news, but I don't know if that was going to be done on this particular story of the deportations. I don't know. But I think people would have been more interested in watching the story. And if there's some blowback to it, then letters to the editor, there is corrections. You correct the record. Journalists can get something wrong, or they can do something where it causes blowback and they have to respond to it. But to be afraid of a potential lawsuit, well, that's on the network itself, that they are going to do something that's going to cause a lawsuit. I mean, libel and slander, statutes still hold in this country. So if you're doing something that is going to go ahead and probably tip the scale on something that being libelous or slanderous against somebody public, yeah, then lawsuits can be filed. But I don't know what the story was going to do. I don't know if it was going to be libelous or slanderous about this at all. But if there's going to be some incorrect reporting, okay, then you correct it after that. But the story's done. Your team is confident and they trust that the content is good. So put it out there. Because this just made things look worse. That's what it was. And apparently what made it even worse is that, according to Holiday Reporter, this episode, this particular segment, still ran in Canada. CBS pulled the segment, but the original version of the news magazine apparently aired in Canada. A source in Canada confirmed that as of early Monday evening, the full original 60 Minutes episode, which include the segment entitled Inside CCOT, was available on Global's TV streaming platform, which carries some of CBS's programming. And Global's a big TV network in Canada. And there's the thing about media being too slow in traditional media. So by Barry Weiss, when she asked that the episode be adjusted, the network already released the week's lineup for the news magazine, and everything came too late, and whatever they had at Global, they ran. Right? So whoever is responsible for transmitting the episode to Global, the Canadian TV partner, did not make the requested change. So they still ran it. So the segment is still now widely available on platforms like X and YouTube from viewers posting segments, their videos of the segment, though copyright complaints from CBS could temper that enthusiasm. So it still got out there anyway. So Barry Weiss made a big screw up. And who knows if it was a matter of how long it takes for their team to ask for the change to be made. But who is going back to Barry Weiss and saying, Barry, we can't make that change. The wheel's in motion. We can't retract all this in time. It's not going to happen. We have too many places that are going to be worried about this. So you have to have more time in front before you make this kind of change. And shouldn't have happened the week of. Should have happened maybe the week before or even a week before that. So big screw up all around. And Barry Weiss, I don't know how long she's going to be around at that outfit right there, but that she's not making good decisions overall. Not working for her. Following news story here from Hollywood. A new big labor deal coming up. And the Writers Guild, so there's SAG-AFTRA, Writers Guild, and Directors Guild all looking in together for longer multi-year deals. SAG-AFTRA already looking to go and start off 2026 contract negotiations with studios and streamers. And according to Deadline.com, the AMPTP, being led now by Greg Hessinger, is preparing to offer the Actors Union, the Directors Guild of America, and the Writers Guild a massive injection of cash to get their respective health plan in tip-top shape. And studios and streamers want guilds to agree to their shift contract links from 3 years to 5 years. But nothing's been put in writing officially, and SAG-AFTRA isn't even scheduled to sit down with AMPTP until early February. But insiders know that one of the three guilds has a 6-month reserve, and the AMPTP has pretty much lined up studios and streamers to go ahead and put this out there or put a figure to be put on the table. So they want to offer $110 million to SAG-AFTRA and the Directors Guild of America to get their respective Cadillac plans in the black, the best healthcare plans they have available. Now, plans are currently running huge deficits on a month-by-month basis, according to a well-versed studio and streamer source, and that they're all hemorrhaging money on the healthcare plans that they have to go and support for the actors or directors or whatever. So they got that coming up as well. 5-year contracts they also want to put together as well and, make the pot thicker and much more generous for healthcare for the actors, directors, and the like, for talent. So that's pretty good stuff. I like the proactiveness of this. That's a good thing right there altogether. So I enjoy that. That's a show. Man, I thought it was going to go a little bit shorter than that, but no, we went through a lot. And I still have another show to go and put out for this week. So that's going to be fun. And one last story to bring up here before we wrap things up. Charlemagne the God signs another 5-year, $200 million extension with iHeartMedia. He's now around after Netflix has agreed to stream the Breakfast Club morning show, which runs syndicated to this radio stations all across the country. Charlemagne the God, $40 million a year for his show. I don't know. I guess it's all that working out with that. Andrew Schultz is working out well for him, I guess. Anyway, come back and enjoy my interview with Rafi Gomez here on the Broadcasters Podcast. Remember, the content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.